As the pandemic winds down, or at least hits a lull, more and more businesses have returned to more normal operations, with one key difference: a sizable number of their employees don't want to come back to the workplace if they can help it. Here's a look by the numbers. Gallup found that in the U.S., about half of the full-time workforce have the ability to work from home at least part of the time. And almost 1/3 of workers would like to be fully remote. More than half want a hybrid solution. That compares to 32% who felt that way pre-pandemic. Asked why they prefer hybrid, the biggest reason was to avoid commute times. Second biggest was just general well-being, while the third was work-life balance. So for all those want-to-be hybrid workers, what's the right number of days in the office? For the majority, or 4 in 10, it's 2 to 3 days a week. Another 30% say fewer than 2 would be good. Not surprisingly, most workers would prefer to pick the days themselves. But a high number also think the company should set the schedule and coordinate so teams can be together. If that sounds complicated for the employer, it is. But one thing is clear from the data: how employers respond to this new demand could make all the difference in keeping or losing workers. Well, while working from home some of the time is a new perk for some employees, it also has some downsides, one of which is that not all jobs can be done remotely, potentially creating two classes of workers in the same company and across industries. Lindsay Coffin is a senior research associate at the Conference Board of Canada who has studied hybrid work. Lindsay, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
So it's obviously something that appeals to the workers who can do this. I want to start right there. If you're running a business and you've got some workers who can, their job can be done remotely, and some who can't, have you seen that starting to create any friction, that there are some people who become resentful that they can't do their job remotely?
So the organizations we work with, I think they've taken a really unique approach to this, and they've come up with really strong communications plans to communicate best practices and what jobs can and can't qualify, or what job tasks can and can't qualify for working from home. And as long as there's like a really kind of clear lines drawn, a lot of employees are kind of satisfied with that. But one thing organizations can do to kind of address that disparity is look at other forms of flexibility. So things like compressed work weeks, or making it easier for employees to switch shifts, giving them a little bit more autonomy over what they're working on or who they're working with, or even setting core hours where there's certain times of the day that people have to be in the office,
right,
and then they can work their day around those kind of hours.
And, you know, for those jobs that can be done remotely, one of the themes that are emerging both for workers but also for companies is this idea that you do want to be together sometimes, that there's some value in meeting together, whether that's for the team or your workplace culture or whatever it is. Do you think companies will kind of feel their way into what will be different for every company in terms of figuring out what's enough for either a small team or the company at large?
Yeah, and I really think that depends on the type of work people are doing. And a lot of the benefits of getting together are those social interactions and the ability to brainstorm those social connections, and kind of like a space to bounce ideas around and come up with those really innovative, you know, cross-team collaborative solutions that organizations kind of benefit from.
It feels to me, Lindsay, as though workers have more power over this than they did a few years ago, that something has tipped in the balance where this is a shift that's not going to go back. The pandemic really cemented it for people that this is important and they want it. Do you think that will hold true even in the face of a potential recession where people might be losing their jobs, companies are downsizing? Do you think this is going to be here no matter what?
I do, and I do think that hybrid work, you know, is kind of the way of the future, and it gives companies and organizations a really unique opportunity to redefine that corporate culture. Given, you know, mass labor shortages in a lot of industries and a projected really high number of retirements, I think that demand for workers is probably going to outpace supply for a little bit. So that kind of gives workers that advantage that they didn't necessarily have, you know, 5 or 10 years ago.
The power continues. Lindsay, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Lindsay Coffin is the Senior Research Associate at the Conference Board of Canada. Well, not everyone can do their job remotely, but the idea of a shortened work week is definitely getting new steam. And for the next 6 months, thousands of workers in the UK are participating in a pilot, working 32 hours a week, but being paid as though they worked 40. The question, of course, is whether they can work more efficiently and do the same amount of work in 4 days that they did do in 5. Joe O'Connor is the CEO of 4 Day Week Global, one of the groups behind this experiment. Joe, great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
And this feels so timely. You know, the 4 day work week has been around for years. Some countries, France, for instance, have implemented it years ago. It does get at this problem of the disparity between the workers who can't work from home. If you work a manufacturing line or produce a TV show, you actually have to be there physically. Maybe changing the shape of the work week gets at that. Do you think it has new currency right now for that reason?
I think there's no question it has new currency. You know, the pandemic has been a complete game changer in this growing niche of the 4 day work week, which has been gaining some steam and momentum now for a number of years. But what the pandemic has done is, at all 3 layers of the organization, it's really changed attitudes towards how we organize work. Leaders are much more interested in this concept because they can see the potential for a real competitive advantage if they're able to pull it off in terms of recruiting and retaining staff in a very tight labor market. Managers are much more open-minded to it because they've been forced during the remote and hybrid work revolution to really trust their staff more and to focus more on output rather than how long people are spending at the desk, in the office, or on the clock. And then from the perspective of workers, I think people's horizons have shifted. You know, what they believe is possible now in terms of how we organize work has changed forever. I think people's priorities have changed as well. You know, the role of family, community, caring within people's lives, I think they've really realigned their priorities coming out of the pandemic.
So one of the big questions, of course, will be, and it'll be measured, of course, in this pilot, does the work stay the same? Does productivity improve in the 4 days you are at work to make up for that 5th day that you're not? I know there have been some previous, Microsoft did an experiment with this in Japan that showed massive increases in productivity. There was a New Zealand experiment where it was a 20% jump in productivity. Do you think the data is there that says, yes, people get more productive when they have that better balance of that 3rd day to do their other life?
We've been working with companies in 4 Day Week Global for a number of years now to trial or transition to reduced hour productivity focused working. The benefits and the success stories that we've observed over the last number of years have been extremely solid, extremely consistent, and we expect that to be borne out in these pilot programs and research projects that we're running all over the world. You know, most companies in 2022, when they look at their business closely, when they look at the potential for efficiencies, they find that the 4 day work week is already here. It's just buried under the rubble of poor meeting discipline, outdated processes, poor use of technology, and distractions and interruptions in the workday. And when they get serious about addressing these inefficiencies, they find that a shortened work week is well within reach.
Does this work best, Joe, when it's the same day every week? It's typically, in the studies we've seen, been the Friday. Would it be better if it were a more flexible, just one of the 5 days that workers or companies could choose?
It's not a one-size-fits-all model. It really depends on the company. You know, if most of your company's value is derived from collaboration within your company, within your team. So let's say, for example, you're an advertising agency where it's about delivering X for Y client in Z timeframe, then maybe having people available on the same 4 days for collaboration makes sense, and you have a universal day off. But actually, if you've got a really customer service oriented or a retail oriented business, that's not going to be possible. So it's about devising shifts and rosters to make sure that you've got coverage throughout the work week so you can continue to deliver and maintain that level of service.
Joe, so good to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
No problem.
Joe O'Connor is the CEO of 4 Day Week Global. Coming up, we know life in the big city is expensive. For young people, it may be a game changer. But first, this. Watching hockey is as Canadian as, well, nothing is more Canadian than that. And now, to do it, you'll have to sign up with a cable company. The big broadcasters have won a federal court ruling against piracy that allows them to shut down the transmission of live games on sites without a license to show them. The onus will be on internet service providers to track and stop any illicit broadcasts. While the order is new in Canada, similar actions have been taken in Europe and the UK. The message being, pirates, beware. Back after this.